How's it going? I'm Jared Gillis. Welcome to another All About RVs. Today I wanted to share with you guys a little bit about the RV tankless water heater that we have. We've had one for over 4 years. We actually just swapped ours out to a different one, and there's a handful of problems that come along with an RV tankless water heater. There's some hurdles and some things that you should know about before you dive into it. So we still prefer it over a normal tank water heater. We've had that in our RV in the past before. So with all the problems that come along with them, why would we still want one? So I'll go over that with you, and then I'll also give you some installation tips and how we installed ours. So let's dive right into that today. Okay, to start off, we're going to be talking about RV tankless water heaters because there's so many tankless water heaters out there. I want to talk about the ones that are designed and built for RVs. So if your water heater in your RV went out and you're looking at a tankless, these slide right into that same opening. They have doors that they're manufactured and made for RVing. So those are the ones that we're going to be looking at. They're not going to be electric. So we're going to be looking at the Truma, the Gerard, Suburban makes one, and Atwood makes one also that we're going to be looking at today. So this is the Suburban one, and all of them are going to be propane. Usually RVs don't have enough electricity to be able to give enough electricity to a tankless water heater because it demands so much power to heat it instantly. So propane is going to be the fuel of choice. So that's one thing that might be a problem for a lot of people, is if you only have the choice of propane when you go tankless, is that going to be an issue? Some people like to use their water heater because most of the time when you have a tank water heater in your RV, you can choose between electric and propane. With a tankless, you're going to be stuck with propane. So yes, you will be using more propane just by the fact that you don't have electricity as an option anymore. It doesn't burn through a ton of it. Yes, it uses a decent amount when it's heating it because it's trying to heat it so quickly, but you're not heating that water over and over. So just to give you a rough estimate, we usually go through about 7 gallons in a month as a full-time family of 4, everybody showering once a day, being able to cook, heat, and occasionally use the fridge on propane when we're out boondocking. So that'll give you a little bit of a gauge. The next problem is getting out there and going boondocking, because when you turn on that hot water, there's going to be a little bit more of a delay in getting hot water compared to a normal water heater. Now, a normal water heater, you just have to wait for the water to get all the way through that line and be able to get to your fixture. So there is going to be some water waste there. Now, with a tankless water heater, you have to wait for that to have flow, and then it ignites, and then it creates hot water. So I was timing ours, and ours ignites within 7 seconds, and it usually takes a few more seconds to heat it up. So within 10 seconds, you're getting hot water, but it still has to move through those lines, depending on how far your fixture is from your water heater unit. Let's do a quick test. Let's see how much about 10, 11 seconds worth of water is coming out of the faucet. Okay, so let's grab a quick measuring cup, and we're gonna time out around 11 seconds worth. Here we go. Okay, and so that comes to 2 1/4 cups. So that's not hot water at the faucet here because it still needs to go through those lines, but I could hear the water heater kick on and it was getting up to temperature, and that's how much water it took to make it kick on to start producing hot water. So you can see it's not a lot of water, but the more you do that, it does add up over time. But to put it in perspective, usually if I wash my hands when we're out boondocking, usually the amount of water that I use, the water from the water heater, even if it was a standard one, still wouldn't make it all the way to the faucet to be hot. So if you're trying to conserve water, it's kind of hard to get hot water at the faucets when you're just using a small amount. So that all plays into the boondocking water saving techniques. But that does bring up another problem with tankless water heaters, is when you're out there boondocking and you're trying to take a shower, usually a normal practice to save water is you get in there, you get wet, you turn the water off, you lather up, you get ready, and then you rinse off. And then when you're in the shower and you turn that hot water back on, remember that water heater turned off. So it's gonna take another 10, 11, 12 seconds to get up to temperature. So you're gonna have a blast of cold water while you're in there trying to rinse off. So It'll start off warm because that's what's in the line, and then you get that little burst of cold, the 2.5 cups or 2.25 cups of cold water, and then it's going to get warm again. So that's just something that you either have to get used to, or it might be a deal breaker if you don't want something like that while you're out boondocking. For me, it's not a big deal. I usually like cold water on my face when I'm washing it, so I use that when I'm washing my face, and then the rest of the water is just fine. But that is something you definitely want to know about before you get a tankless water heater and then you find these things out. This is what you'd want to know to make a decision. So there are a few more problems that go, but it's kind of more manufacturer by manufacturer, and each one has their own pros and cons. Maybe we'll go through a few of those, but why would we still want a tankless water heater with these problems and these hurdles that you have to get over? And really it comes down to having endless hot water and never having to worry about that tank having to warm up. So when we get somewhere, we don't have to worry about getting it on, turning the propane on, turning on electric. Those things aren't a concern at all. If we have propane and we have water, we have hot water. There's no recharge time. There's no cycle in between showers. If somebody just did the dishes and somebody wanted to jump in the shower, we don't have to wait for that tank to finish warming up so they can have a decent amount of time in the shower to be able to take a normal shower. Even before we had the tankless water heater and we just had the standard one, we'd use propane and we'd use electric, and it just doesn't even compare to the amount of hot water you can get out of a tankless one. We can get our family of 4 back-to-back showers, even with doing some dishes in between, and be able to get in and out the door with all the hot water that we needed, and we didn't have to wait for any of the recharge time in between any of those showers. And on top of that, you don't even have to worry about the length of the shower, worrying about running out of hot water for just a standard shower. You don't have to rush. You can just take a shower and not even have to worry about how much hot water is in there. Now, when we first swapped out our water heater, we went with the Girard. I think you can get it for around $515. It's not a bad unit. There's a few things that come along with that. So let's talk about some of the problems per manufacturer. So the Girard is on the lower end for the amount of heat that comes out of it. I think it's just over 42,000 BTUs. So it's on the lower end when we start comparing these, but it fired up rather quickly and got that heat to the water pretty quick. But it did have one additional way to be able to regulate the temperature. So number one, it came with a control panel to where you could set your temperature. So if you just wanted to turn on hot and not have to mix in cold, then you could set your temperature. I want to take a shower at 106, and then you could just know that that water coming in was going to be at 106. Now, we did get to some situations where the water coming in was really, really cold, like in the mountains of Colorado or December in South Dakota. And we were still able to get it up to temperature, but this one had an additional dial on there where you could dial back the amount of water that could go through the water heater so that it could have time to warm it up. So you would lose and suffer a little bit of that pressure so that you could get up to temperature. So that was one of the drawbacks, but one of the features with it, having the lower BTU and being able to still get up to temperature, that's how they handled it. I wanted to pause here for a minute and be really clear about this Girard water heater, because we had to set the exact temperature of the water, hot water that we wanted to use. If we tried to mix in any cold, it would shut down the hot water system and it would get extremely cold. So we always had to set the exact temperature on that digital display to be able to get the temperature of water that we wanted. The new one that we have, the Suburban one, we can mix in a little bit of cold water to get the temperature we want in the shower. But with the Girard, we always had to set the exact temperature on that digital display. Okay, now back to it. Now, looking at the Atwood Tankless water heater, we can see that we step up in the amount of BTUs, but we also step up in price. And we also take a little bit of an upgrade in the amount of water flow going through here. So we're looking at a half gallon a minute, 50,000 BTUs, but this is usually around $900. So we step up quite a bit in price, and compared to the competition, it's a little high priced for what you're getting. So the one that we have right now is the Suburban IW60, and that that one steps up to 60,000 BTUs. We also have the half-gallon flow to be able to activate it and get water flowing for us. And this comes in at around $545, somewhere in that ballpark. And with this one, we now have that a much higher BTU, so we don't have to try and restrict the flow to the water heater. If we have a really cold water source coming in, which we've been in Montana, we've been in some very cold environments for that water coming in, it's not been a problem at all. And with this one, it has like a modulating effect between the burners. We still set the water temperature around 110, 112, but we now have that ability to add a little bit of cold to tailor it for exactly what you would like. The drawbacks for me on this one is it feels like it just takes a few seconds longer to be able to get that water going and to heat it up to the temperature that you'd like it to than the one that we had with the Gerard. It just feels like a few seconds behind where that one was. So we're actually boondocking right now. So this morning when I took a shower, I counted for how long you get that little burst of cold water, and it was about 7 seconds. So you get 7 seconds of cool water and then it starts warming up again. By 10, 11 seconds, it's already back up to temperature. So gives you an idea of what to expect. As a side note, I've been thinking it'd be fun to put in a hot water recirculating pump in there. I know that Truma and Suburban, they have models that have recirculating systems built into them, but those have to be installed at the factory. So it'd be nice whether you have a tank water heater or a tankless to be able to have a recirculating pump so you have zero water waste when you go out boondocking. Would be kind of a fun idea. Now, last but not least is the Truma water heater. Now, I've covered this when we've gone to other RV shows, but I don't have any actual hands-on experience with it. But I think it's one of the top tankless water heaters that are out there. For one, they have like a reservoir that helps heat that water before it sends it out. So that way you're not waiting for that little startup process in the beginning. So that would solve a lot of those problems, but I'd love to get my hands on it and to really test it and see how it operates and go boondocking with it and to be able to use it in a lot of different scenarios. So the other thing that they've done that's really nice is the descaling process. You have these little tabs that you put in there and it helps descale the inside of the water heater. Now, when we've had to descale ours, we just run some vinegar through it on a pump for a while, and it really wasn't that big of a deal, but being able to just put a couple of tabs in the Truma and have it descale over time is actually kind of a neat feature built into that. And so all these ones that we've talked about, the Gerard, the Truma, the Suburban, the Atwood, I believe they all have winterization protection. So as long as you're still using the RV, it has a process to be able to save it in freezing temperatures. So if you're going to winterize a unit like this also, we usually just blow out the lines with air, and so that there's no water inside of that water heater. It's not like a tank that you have to drain. If you're blowing out your lines, then there's not going to be any water in that water heater. But as far as drawbacks for the Truma, it really only has one, in my opinion. I would love it if they let other people install this water heater. Installing these water heaters really isn't that difficult. I can kind of walk you through the process, but for the Truma, you have to take it to a dealership and they have to install it. So by the time you're out the door, you're usually looking at around $1,800 to $2,000 is the typical price that I've seen out there. Compared to these other ones that we've installed on our RV, you're looking around $515, $545, puts it in that ballpark. So compared to $2,000, there's a big difference in those two prices. Now, just to show you how easy it is to replace a water heater on your RV, let me walk you through the process of installing it on our RV. So first off, you want to remove the old water heater. So you want to cut the caulking around the edge. You want to be able to take off the faceplate of the old one, and you want to remove the connections at the back of the water heater, the hot, the cold, any electrical connection, and you want to remove the propane. So I put a rag underneath there when I disconnect the water lines, so that way I've already turned off the water to the RV and drained the water out. So if there is any water, it's just a real simple, easy cleanup. And then from there, we can just remove the old water heater. We can just pull it out of its spot, and then we can clean up those edges. Clean it, get all that caulking off of there, and get it ready for the new water heater. So then it's pretty simple. We can slide this water heater into that same opening, and we can put our frame around there, so that way we can start to seal that up, put that caulking around the edges, and be able to screw it to the wall and have it sealed up nice and tight. Now, this Suburban unit had a couple more connections that our old one did not. It had a line for condensation to drain out of, and then it had an actual way to drain it. So we had two pipes that we needed to just poke through the floor and to be able to get to the outside. So if we needed to have it drain, or if we needed to have it drain that condensation, it wasn't going to be stuck inside of the RV. So we made those connections, and we were able to attach this water heater to the floor, just screwed right in there to secure it from moving. And then we connected our hot water. We put our plumbing connections on there, and then we were able to use the PEX crimp tool to be able to crimp that all together. And then we did the same thing on the cold water side, put our fittings on there and crimped those connections together. Then connecting the propane is really simple. We just tighten down that fitting. We want to make sure that there's no leaks coming from there. So I sprayed it with some soapy water to see if there was any bubbles once I turned on the propane, because you don't want leaking propane in your RV or in this compartment. You just never want leaking propane. So test that to make sure that the fittings are good and we don't have any issues there. Now, this water heater you can wire up a couple of different ways. You could just do it with a simple switch, and you can use the dip switches inside to be able to set your temperature. But for us, we did the control panel so we can digitally set the temperature, and that overrides the dip switches inside of there. So we made those few electrical connections. We had our 12 volt positive and negative, and then we had our few low volt connections to allow the control panel to control the water heater. At this point, I wanted to test the unit before I kind of finished up the install. So water onto the RV, I opened up the hot water side before I powered it up. That way I could get any of that air that's in the system out, so that we're not trying to heat it up with just air pockets in there. So I got all that air out of there, then fired it up, and hot water was flowing in no time fast. So then at that point, all I had to do was put on that door on the outside. It actually mounts on there. They call it a door, but it screws into place and they have you caulk around it. It's part of the weather sealing process. So got that in place, sealed it up, and it's been working fantastic. So I hope if you were thinking about installing a tankless water heater, this helped bring up some of those problems that you needed to think about, or not be intimidated by the install. So I hope this helps you make an informed decision. Some people love them, some people hate them. And either way is really fine with me. You can love it or hate it. Just know what you're getting into before you get it. So I think that's going to do it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you want more videos about RVing tips, tricks, tutorials, and videos like this, please hit that subscribe button. And if we don't see you on the road, hopefully we will see you next video.